Meeting is now yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is DJ and I'm an addict.
DJ.
What a lovely venue you've got here. Really good to be here on Friday night. I don't usually do meetings on Friday. It's my a movie night day with my family, but they're away, and it worked out just fine that I can do a meeting on the weekend. They're away, and I don't have to stay at home on my own. I think I was meant to come in December, and then I got ill, and we cancelled. And perfect opportunity. As I was driving along here, I've realised that I used to live about 5 minutes away from here, and I didn't know that this church existed. There was no meetings in Stratford then, and that's when my recovery really started. I was Corporation Street just down the road, and then I was Chapel Close the other way. There was no meetings in Stratford at the time. It was 2004, and we had a meeting in Mile End. There was a candlelight meeting, and then we had one in East Ham, like upper floor of a church in there as well. So really, I got slightly earlier. I had a little walk around the places, the street where I used to live, and brings a lot of interesting memories. I guess I've started my recovery here. I got into the room slightly earlier, but then I had a relapse, and 2004 is the day when I'm sort of counting my clean day now. It's difficult to talk about sort of, a particular step in 15 minutes. It's difficult to open it up and sort of share about it, but I'll try to do my best. I guess the way I see the steps today, let's start with the fact that at some point in my recovery, I did loads of different fellowships. I did NA, I did other fellowships as well. At some point, a friend of mine has asked me, I was talking to her, and she said, why don't you just pick one and stick with one? And there was something about NA I loved. The way we talk about the disease of addiction rather than a particular substance, and that hit home for me. So from that point onwards, I was doing NA only, and I don't do any other fellowship now, but I do NA a lot. And NA is a big part of my life. I go to various conventions, I do a lot of service, and I'm quite passionate about NA. I fucking love it. Regardless of where I go, I try to hit the meeting. Like, I'm planning to go to Japan this year, and I love to go to the meeting. I've got a few contacts already, and I will definitely go to the meeting there. There's something about going to the meetings. Like, even here, when I used to go to this candlelight in Mile End, I used to go to the meeting. I couldn't speak English at the time. The only thing I've learned to say is my name, and even though my name was too long to say, so I shortened it to DJ, and that's almost like stuck to me for years now. And then I learned the word addict, so I would just say DJ Addict, and then just sit there with the candlelights and listen to what people were sharing without really understanding. But there's something more about the words in these rooms that really did it for me. The unity, the sort of the togetherness, and the way I see the steps today is pretty simple. So the first 3 steps, I see them as almost like preparatory steps. So you're preparing to do the work. Then you've got the main bit of steps is 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9. They are the sort of the action steps. And then you've got 10, 11, and 12, which is your maintenance steps. So you can continue doing them, despite the fact you may finish the round, you may go back to step 1, but you can still continue with 10, 11, and 12, regardless of where you are. And it's difficult to talk about 7 without really touching 6, because they're almost like a two steps together. And when we were talking to Raf, and I've asked him what step I'm going to share, and he said, well, maybe 6, maybe 7, and because we were not sure. And I guess I'll try and touch on 6, and I know you've had somebody sharing it a couple of weeks ago, but for me, 6, it's all about willingness. The interesting part about 6 and 7 for me, and it's in our book, and it's, I don't know if we've got steps, I haven't got steps here, but it's in our steps as well. Step 6 talks about defects, where step 7 talks about shortcomings. Mm-hmm. And I do steps in 3 different languages. It's just happened that I speak different languages, and I do step with different people, different sponsees from different countries, and I use 3 different languages. So I translate a lot of literature as well. And when I was looking at differences between defects and shortcomings, something hit home for me that, there's got to be a difference. Why do we talk about removing defects of character in 6 and then shortcomings in 7? So the way I understand, and that's purely my understanding today, and it works for me, and that's the way I work it with all of my sponsees, is that 6 for me and defects is why. why would I act in a certain way? It's something that is within me, and I'm not sure that I will be able to change them. Whereby the shortcomings is what I actually do. It's an actual action that comes as a result of that one. And that I can definitely change. And that's where the step 7 comes into play with this. So 6 is about willingness. We became willing to, to get better. And step 7, it's about humility in action. Humility is a strange word for me as an addict, because I don't really understand what humble means. But once they start talking about spirituality, and at some point, in my recovery, I've realized that certain things from outside only work on a temporary basis. I won't be able. I remember I bought a car, and those of you who understand cars, it was a sports car, an M3, BMW M3. I really wanted that car because I was a kid and I played Need for Speed on an old PC, wasn't even PlayStation. I fucking loved that car, and I got that car and it was outside my house. And about 2 days after buying that car, I realised that I'm not feeling it anymore. Like that sense of happiness and joy is gone. And I remember a friend of me visiting us, and he goes, "Well, it's within a week it's going to go." And I didn't really understand what he said at the time, because it almost felt like he was jealous, and I felt angry with him that he's like, I want to feel that. I want to change the way I feel, because that's what all my using was about. I don't like the way I feel a lot of the time. I don't like to be lonely. I don't like to be sad. I don't like to be happy. Do you know what I mean? I just been to a convention a couple of weeks ago, and I had 6 days of pure happiness. I cried, I laughed. There was loads of friends, loads of people I love in recovery. And at some point within that weekend, I've realized that I'm not really comfortable in that feeling, because I'm not content. I'm no longer balanced. That happiness got me knocked off. And even with that, with me being an addict, even that happiness can get me disbalanced. And this is why it's so important for me to think about it as a spiritual path. And step 7, in a way, it says that in order for us to change, we need to do spiritual things. So when I want to act out, I've got a choice. I truly believe, and in the last, 10 years of self-discovery, of my journey in this program, I do believe that I've got a tiny moment between that thought comes in and I make a decision to act on it, where I could still stop myself from doing it. It's so tiny, but it's almost like if I step into that, or if I allow any of them thoughts to grow, almost like, water the plants, the thoughts in my head, I'm going to lose. There's no way I'm going to be able to, resist whatever that is. The other important thing for me to understand, and it's only in the last couple of years I've really realized that I'm not going to be perfect. Because I'm a perfectionist in life. I love things in a certain order. Like, my wife and my daughter are away now. I fucking love that. I've got a house to myself. My coffee cup and my coffee beans and everything is in certain order, under a certain angle. So when the light shines, it hits it in the right spot. And that's how my brain works. So, and when it's not that, I really struggle. Like, I ask people not to go into my home office because I don't want them to move things where I work. Because if they start moving the things, I get stressed. And I guess it's, if I'm sure if I were to get diagnosed, there'd probably a condition and a name for it. But to me, a lot of it is still sort of feeds into the addiction and how I live the life with this disease. And going back to why I like our steps is because it's about addiction. I've been clean for a number of years now, and I don't have to talk about drugs. But I still do, I'm on step 4 again, and instead of the word drug, I replace it with defect now. So I read the book, and I replace every drug word for defect. Because they're still as active today as they were. They change, you know what I mean? Some of them disappear, some of them come back. Some of them, left me, and I've not smoked a cigarette since 2004. But there are other things that I still do, and I try to sort of give in and stop doing it. And I guess this is where that step 7 and shortcomings kick in for me. It's that if I got this pause, and if I'm able at that moment of time, if I'm able to stop myself and not do that, a lot of the time my sponsor referred to it as it's almost like invisible line, and this is where I live, and this is where my disease lives. And if I'm able to stay on the right side of it, and not cross the line, because as soon as I step into that disease territory, I'm done. It's only a matter of time. I may not act on it straight away, and there is. I use porn as an example, and I'm not sure if, like, I remember. Probably 15 years ago, I went to a meeting, a men's meeting in Camden Town, and up until that time, I was clean for about 5-6 years, let's say. I didn't really understand. I didn't know that other people have the same issue with porn. And once I started talking to other people, I realised that it's an addictive behaviour, that my disease has got control over me. And then I started, I've realised that I don't want to live that way. I'm living a spiritual life, and it conflicts with a lot of stuff I do in life, and with a lot of stuff I do spiritually. I opened up about it to my wife. We had a discussion about it, and I had 2 or 3 years which were porn free. But then suddenly, a thought comes into my mind, and I give it a little bit of water. And about 2 months later, I was back on it. As an addict, I could make any area of my life become a problematic, addictive area. You could take anything. I know people who, like, I've got a sponsor who's got a massive issues with fishing. Thank you. He's like obsessed about fishing. He spends £1,000 with a little, like, I don't even know what they're called, but the plasticky bits you put on the rod to fish. Like, he spends, what is it?
Is it a lure?
A lure, thank you. Yeah, that's it. So he spends he spends hundreds on the lures, and at some point he had to admit that is how his addiction manifests in his life. So for me today, it's about being spiritually balanced. I was looking for the right word in English, and the closest I could get to is content. Where I'm not feeling like super happy, when I'm not super sad, where I'm okay. Just, so I don't have to act out. I get home, that thought of, oh, maybe I should go and watch another episode of Sopranos and just have a packet of crisps. If I'll continue watering that thought, the chances of me being there are going to be quite high. If at that moment of time I say, no, that's not what you need. You've got a plan. You need to do this and that. I could resist. And what I've noticed is that the more I resist, the easier it becomes. A little bit like I've shared about porn earlier as well. That 3 years of being porn free has given me a lot of knowledge and understanding of what it is. So the next time I started it was easier. I could start from having an experience and knowing what I need to avoid in life. I guess the other thing for me is, and it talks about in step 7, is understanding that I'm not perfect, which I've mentioned, and understanding that my way is not necessarily the right way. I'm really struggling to hear other people. And it's not just in the rooms, it's in general. And I've been acting that way for years, and it's only recently I've realized that I would go into a certain environment and I would be so close-minded, where we talk about, open-minded being as one of them sort of 3 main spiritual principles we need to stay alive. And if I'm not open-minded, the chances are I'm going to relapse. But I'm going into these environments, and I've recently started, I went back into the education as well, and I'm sitting in a class of fellow students, and somebody's telling me what, they've been taught on how to teach us students, and I'm already disagreeing with that person. In my head, I know better. I know how to sort of, how to manipulate him into thinking that I'm right. And it was quite interesting. The person who was teaching us is a fellow addict. And it's only later I've realised that we talk a very similar language. And at some point I've realised that, I can't really do that. I have to go in there with an open mind. And you know, how stupid is that of me to pay somebody money to go into education and think that I know better than anyone else? But that's my default position. That's where I am. I've got about 2 minutes left, so I think it's also important for me to start the day right, because my default position for most of the days are already in negative. So if you've got a 0 as a sort of an even line, and then you can work yourself up to 10 or 20 or 30, almost like a thermometer, where you've got a outside temperature. I start my day on -10 regardless of what and where I am. So I've learned that it's important for me to have my morning routine in a certain way in order for me to face the world and face you guys and face my family and face my colleagues and face everyone I work with as a normal human being. Almost like at that default position, not being in a negative. Because I was reading a step with a sponsee of mine earlier today, and I said, I share this example of him, that if I go and I work from home, so I wake up and sometimes, if I'm like went to bed later, I wake up 5 minutes to the time I need to start work, because my head tells me that 5 minutes is enough. So I go downstairs, plug the laptop on, and if I read them emails straight away, I read them in a very different mind. If I open my phone and I see messages, and don't get me wrong, some of them are positive messages, but if I read them in a certain way, in a certain mindset, they're not reading the same. So what I've realised, and recently this Christmas I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she recommended me this little device called the brick that actually bricks your phone. So you touch on it. So I leave it in the office, I touch on it, and I don't touch my phone after an hour of waking up. And it works for me. I don't know, like being an addict, I'll probably find a way of tricking it and convincing myself that I can unbrick it just to check that one important message. But so far, it does the trick. And when I do start the day in the right way, the day is very different. I do feel calm, I do feel content. I don't have to argue with people on the road. I went to the pharmacy the day before yesterday, and they said, "Oh, your prescription is running late by the day." I said, "That's fine." Came back tomorrow. So that was yesterday. I went back yesterday and I said, "Oh, sorry, it's running late by the day." And in my head I'm thinking, "But you said that yesterday." So it's like it doesn't make sense. It's got to be here now. And I'm about to start this argument. And again, I've got that millisecond to make that decision, if I want to go there or if I just thank them and walk away. Because I know how I feel. I know I suffered enough, and I know how I can make other people feel, how I can make other people feel very uncomfortable around me. And I don't want to live that way today. So I guess that's 6 and 7 in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DJ.